Welcome everybody, and yeah, it's an awareness month, so, and I think a very topical thing, and you're going to find that certainly the local Stroke and Heart Foundation in South Africa do a lot of work to try and make this very much an awareness month, and they work very hard, and because as Drew mentioned, the statistics are quite scary, and I don't think we're always aware of that, and as we go through, I'll start to show you that it's not that you just have to have heart disease to start with. Other conditions actually eventually influence our heart, which I think is why some of the stats can be quite scary. So pretty much what we talk about is the cardiovascular system. So cardio meaning heart, and the vascular being all the blood vessels that traverse the whole body in our transport system. And so, I mean, the heart really is like a muscular pump. That's what it is. Works really hard, and of course it moves all that blood all around the body, right down to the little tips of our fingers and toes, and the red blood being the one that has already been oxygenated. As we've breathed in, we've got oxygen. The blood has started in the lungs, and it then sends it to the pump, and it says, okay, get it to everybody and everywhere around the body. And then when it's kind of used up, if you like, there's no more oxygen, then the deoxygenated blood, which is denoted by those blue markers and little roads and systems, they get back to the heart. It then pumps it back to the lungs, picks up some more oxygen, gets back to the pump, and on it goes again. So this heart of ours works really hard. In fact, it's considered that it pumps about 100,000 times a day. So we really do have to look after it. If we don't look after it, it won't look after us, and you know, everything will turn blue rather than keep some red lines along our transport system. So that is exactly what we're talking about. The cardio being the pump of the heart, and the vascular system where it actually takes all the nutrients and the blood to all parts of our body. So yeah, just every day we have 130 heart attacks happen in South Africa. Not all of them are fatal, but it's an ongoing thing, and the number is very, very high. And it's quite difficult to believe actually, but more South Africans die of heart disease than all cancers combined. And as I say, because it's not just the fact that it's only a heart disease to start with, it's affected by other diseases of lifestyle that we have. But nevertheless, the numbers and the facts are very sobering. And so that pump of ours, we really need to look after it. This just a little graphic just to sort of remind us, I think these are the kind of things many of us think about when we think about heart and circulation, and some more common than others to us. I mean, blood pressure, fats in our blood, blood vessels. We might not think so much that blood sugar would have anything to do with our heart, but there's one of those conditions that feeds into heart disease. Now, bear in mind that all these things are normal. We're supposed to have a degree of blood pressure. We're supposed to have fats in our blood. We're supposed to have blood sugar. But it's when it actually gets elevated and out of control. I mean, that blood sugar, for example, an example I would use would be that it almost is like rust. It stays in the bloodstream instead of being in the cells. And then, of course, it becomes a bit destructive. So it starts to attach itself to proteins, whether it be in the eyes or whether it be on your blood vessels, for example. Certainly in the kidneys, it starts to affect it, and the kidneys regulate blood pressure. So that's how that starts to influence blood pressure, which then becomes a heart health condition. Weight, for example, being overweight, we all know that's relatively undesirable. But what does it make it do? It makes the pump have to work harder. Sort of fat cells give off inflammatory markers, they give off inflammatory signals. And heart disease and many of our diseases of lifestyle are inflammatory conditions. In fact, our bodies in a sort of a Western system with the sort of foods we eat and the lifestyles we live, we're a little more inflamed than we should be. And that's kind of setting us up, if you like, or bigger targets for lifestyle diseases. It's kind of fertilizer for disease. And then, of course, the one that perhaps isn't as familiar to many of you is homocysteine. And that's something we're going to talk about tonight, because that's sort of more the product-specific area that we're going to go to tonight. And homocysteine, again, is something we all produce and is used in different ways, and it's a byproduct of activities in the body, and it needs to be managed, just like blood sugar needs to be managed or blood fats need to be managed. And we're going to sort of talk about how we can do that. But as I say, these things, when they get out of balance, are the things that start to cause a problem in our health in terms of our heart. And that's why the numbers actually look so sobering, because everything is so influenced by one another. So of course we are more specifically interested in foods that we eat and the nutrients that are needed to be able to manage this. Many people will have some of these conditions and they're taking medications, and they must certainly continue to take their medications. I think one concern that we probably, some people personally experience it or have know people. I said, know a guy, for example, who permanently looks pregnant because he's got such a big stomach on him. And he always saying, no, but my blood pressure's fine, my blood fats are fine, because I always think he's a heart attack waiting to happen. And yet what it is he goes to the doctor and all the numbers look good because he's on medication. So his cholesterol levels numbers look correct in terms of the criteria. But basically what's happened is the medication's doing the work, but he really hasn't learned anything about the condition, doesn't really know how to manage it in terms of his food, so carries on just the way he always did. And that's, I think, the concern here is people are not familiar with how they can manage the conditions more effectively with the food that they eat and the lifestyles that they live. So that's our job, to make that sort of an awareness out there for people. So the way that NeoLife do it, of course, is to try and fill some dietary gaps and to make sure that some of the nutrients that are specific to some of those conditions are at least finding their way onto our plate of food. And if they're not doing that, well, then let's put them in some sort of other delivery form so that we can actually get them into the diet, into the body, and so people can benefit from them. Yeah, but of course, this is a pretty daunting number of products. And so where do you start? That's always the challenge. And very often people give up before they've even started. So what we do at NeoLife is we try to make it simple to start with for everything, because basically there are certain foods that should be on our plate. And so we always go to what we call our core nutrition or our core products. And you're not going to go wrong by starting there, because as I say, those are things that we'll talk about them, should be on our plate of food on a regular basis. And then we can add as we have a sort of need for a particular targeted area of the body. It could be our weight, it could be stress. In this case, we're going to talk about heart health. So let's look at that core nutrition just for a minute. We call them our core products, and we always start here, and there's always a good reason. Well, sometimes people question how these products can be for everything and everybody, but these foods are for everything and everybody. So if we look at the packaging there, we'll see that we're representing fruit and vegetables, for example. We've all heard that. Whole grains, lean but fat, the fatty oils of the fish that we want. It's lean fish, but we actually have got fat in their actual muscle. And so we want to eat that. Those are omega-3 fats. And then, of course, we want to have high quality protein. We're almost entirely made of protein. So we have a shake that delivers that and delivers fiber and regulates our blood sugar. But those are the foods that should be on our plate on a daily basis, virtually. And I think that's where we come short. We tend to think, oh, well, they tick the box. Yes, we eat this, or yes, I tend to eat that, and my family eats fruits and whatever. But we've got to do these things on a daily basis or on a very regular basis. And that's where I think the challenge comes in. And that's where just having it delivered in a different form helps to just fill that gap, which is what NeoLife is very passionate about doing. So let's just unpack, for example, this little sachet that I showed you with the fruit and vegetables and fish, etc. And this is what is in the little sachet on a daily basis. So we're representing the different food groups, and we're looking at the actual nutrients specifically that are important in those different foods that our body actually needs to be able to enable it to work on a regular basis and work for us, actually. So let's go back to that little graphic and start to put the products together and just briefly talk about how they influence these different areas. We're not going to go into every single product that we have for heart health this evening, but we are going to just get started and just add in a few little items to help us on our awareness this month. So just in terms of blood pressure, for example, that little pack is going to have different vitamins and minerals. It's going to make sure that the blood doesn't clot excessively, so that it's going to flow, so it's not going to induce too much pressure. For the blood sugar, for example, we're going to look at both those products there, because our blood sugar needs to be controlled, as I pointed out. It needs to be able to not fluctuate too much. It mustn't get too dominant and stay in the blood for too long. So we've got a shake there that is actually what we call glycemically controlled. So the foods that we've chosen to put in there, which are nutritious and needed on a daily basis, don't spike our blood sugar. They don't induce too much insulin demand. They don't make our pancreas tired, and they don't constantly make us hungry. So those things, all those factors we've built in there, so that will influence, for example, other aspects of our health, our weight, our blood vessels, and the pump, our heart. And then, of course, the vitamins and minerals are needed. We need chromium, for example. We need zinc. We need calcium, all to help the insulin component balance the blood sugar. So you can see that while we don't have to go into too much detail about every ingredient, the core products are touching on so many different aspects of our health without us even having to think about it. The homocysteine, which we'll talk about in more detail, but there again, what is very specifically needed for controlling homocysteine levels is vitamin B. And so you'll find that represented here, but in some cases we might need more. And then of course, all the other aspects of those of nutrients are going to be helpful for not oxidizing the fats, for example, making sure the blood vessels stay in good condition. Things we mentioned about some of the negative aspects if homocysteine is too high. So even though we might not remember all those details, what I want you just to feel secure about is that those little packs and that core nutrition is going to influence in a very positive way all the aspects of what you need to keep a healthy cardiovascular system. Our blood vessels, again, yes, we don't want inflammation. We don't want oxidation. We want flexibility. And all the cells, I mean, there are different cells in the body that need just nutrients to make the membranes in good condition so that we can actually accept nutrients that come our way. So influence in many different ways. I talked about the shake. The shake is in fact a complete meal replacement. So if we want to manage our weight, we can actually have it to replace a meal or even 2 meals for that matter. And in fact, to be able to balance our sugar level is not a bad idea to start the day with a shake, because that way we don't get onto a roller coaster of spiking our sugar and then feeling hungry and then constantly wanting to eat. If we start on a steady level that just undulates and just keeps our blood sugar on an even keel, then we're not going to be able to induce a blood sugar spike, and we're not going to be hungry and not actually add to our weight problems. And then of course the little sachet will just make sure that we fill all the gaps since we're not eating some of the variety of foods. Well, there we have it. We put them into the little sachet and enable us to have a good plate of food, even though it might not be a physical one. And then our blood fats, we want to make sure that they don't oxidize, because, you know, I think we can relate to if we leave a bottle of oil, or cooking oil, for example, without the lid on properly, or we just have it for too long, there's eventually a smell that comes off that, which most of us would probably throw away because we wouldn't want to consume that. Why? Because the fats have oxidized. They've been exposed to oxygen. They've become, their structures actually changed. So they're not necessarily going to be good for us. So that's what happens to the fats in our body. They also get exposed to different things. They get exposed to oxygen. They can potentially, if you like, go rancid, or their structure can change, and then their behavior changes. So we need things like antioxidants. That's what we get from our fruit and vegetables. We don't want inflammation as a result of that. And we want a whole variety of different fruit and vegetables that also provide antioxidant benefits, and the vitamins and minerals. So this little pack, a little core nutrition program, really does an excellent job as a launching pad. And as I say, even if one is on medication, one can still continue to do just taking something to supplement the nutrient component of our diet, but not to necessarily take the place of the medication. That's not our job here. So let's go to one product specifically that we're going to talk about this evening, which we're going to add to our core nutrition as a starting point. Obviously, we have, as you could see from that selection of products, we have many products, and we have many others that would actually work on our heart health. But I want to talk about Lipotropic adjunct this evening. Now, that's quite a mouthful, and I think we should talk about the name first, because I think quite a few people don't always know how to say it. And so when you don't know how to say something, you're too scared to say it. And so you probably aren't talking to people about Lipotropic adjunct and maybe not even ordering it yourself. And in fact, that's a pity, because it's an excellent product. So let's look at the name and see what it actually means. It's for our blood fats, our blood vessels, and homocysteine. And if we break the name down to Lipotropic adjunct, lipo basically means fat, lipo or lipo. Tropic, not a common English word, but it actually means attracted to or has an affinity for. So it's something that has an affinity for fat or works with fat. And then adjunct means in addition to, something more, extra. So the product could be called Lipotropic Plus, for example, which is the sort of terminology that NeoLife use. So lipo fat, something that's attracted or works with fat, and there's more. And there's always more in a NeoLife product. And that's what I love about our products. I really love about this one, because it's it doesn't sound scientific, but they're actually always very clever products because every ingredient is in there for a very good reason, one to work with the other. So let's look at those ingredients and see how they work in relation to this program that we've already got set up for ourselves. So where we're going to focus more specifically on your lipotropic is with homocysteine. It's going to help with our blood vessels, and it's going to help very specifically on blood fats, but it's going to straddle blood pressure and blood fats. And the reason these are chosen, because as I mentioned in the beginning, if homocysteine is out of balance, then it starts to negatively influence actually our blood vessels. It damages them, so they're not as flexible, they don't contract and relax as the way they should. And it definitely helps to oxidize the blood fats, which is exactly what we don't want to happen, and tends to induce higher clotting factors, so that's why it can influence blood pressure. So what is the reason that is actually happening, and why are we slotting it in here in conjunction with our basic core products? Well, these are basically the ingredients that lipotropic has. So lipo meaning having an affinity for fat, and there's more. So the lipotropic factors, or the components in the product that are going to assist with keeping fats flowing in the blood, are inositol and choline. And we all know that oils and water don't mix. If we put it together in a sort of a solution, eventually they separate. So the interesting thing is that we have lots of fats or lipids in our blood, which we're supposed to have, but they have to circulate, they have to move, and yet they don't mix well. So our body compensates by having what we call lipoproteins, which are a protein and a fat mixed together, and that helps the blood to sort of swim along, if you like. But there are ingredients that are needed to make that happen too, and inositol and choline are two such ingredients, and they we get from our food, and they're fairly abundant in the food supply, but actually generally around the world, people don't get enough of these ingredients. Now, remember that these are not only used, choline is not only for heart health. I mean, it's important for our cell membranes, it's important during pregnancy, it's important for our cognitive skills. So these you'll find in other products and you'll think, well, it doesn't seem to relate to what we've been talking about now. But remember, these things work all over. That's why our core products influence so many systems. So these ingredients are specific here, but they will also influence other systems. So the lipotropic factors, the things that are attracted or have an affinity for fats or have an influence on fats, are the inositol and choline. Now the homocysteine levels, which is in fact what we were concerned about, will be kept in check if we have these basic B vitamins, B6, B12, and folic acid. Because as I said, we all produce homocysteine. It's part of the metabolism of some of the other amino acids in the body. But what's important is that what happens when we produce a byproduct or a waste product? What happens to it? Do we manage it properly? Now, just as an example, everything that's happening in the body is producing some byproduct or a waste material, or producing something that has to be changed or managed or excreted. So that is what I'm talking about here. And an example might be, just to keep it simple, if we were to make a fire, and the reason why we made the fire was obviously to keep warm, so that would be the purpose of it. But we all know that there's a byproduct of that activity, and that is smoke. So that is quite a natural thing. We will have a fire and we will have a byproduct, but we need to manage that byproduct. So we need to have a chimney. And provided we've got that chimney or some sort of outlet whereby that byproduct or waste or smoke can go, we're happy. We're delighted with the fire and we're warm. But as soon as that chimney is not there or that outlet is not there, we're not going to worry about that fire. It's going to be incidental, because it's the waste product or the byproduct that's going to be the problem. That smoke is going to be the danger. So that's what I'm talking about here. Homocysteine is something that we all produce. And as long as we have those vitamins B6, B12, and folic acid, it will be managed because it's a byproduct. But left without those nutrients, it then accumulates in our blood. And then it, of course, affects those blood vessels that I was talking about. It oxidizes our fats. It actually causes inflammation in the blood vessels. It causes increased blood clotting factors. So now it starts to become a heart health issue here. But actually, we all produce it. So can you see how important just some nutrients are? They might appear not important to you or sound like you've heard them all before, but they have to be there to manage that byproduct. And so that's how we do, that's what's in this particular product that is managing homocysteine. As I say, if left its own devices, becomes a health risk to our heart health. And then we've got other things. Now, these are part of the adjunct. These are the extras now. The bioflavonoids, or citrus, they come from citrus plants or citrus fruits. Most of us have heard of flavonoids now in NeoLife. So these are a component of flavonoids. And we know that flavonoids are antioxidants. They are protectors in the watery environment, so of course in the bloodstream, but also they're very good at dampening inflammation. And remember I said that's not our friend, inflammation, but it's usually the end result of a whole lot of activity that's out of balance. So just simple citrus bioflavonoids that we've put into this component here, into this product, where we've put lipotropic products and ingredients, and the adjunct or the extras are going to be things like our bioflavonoids to make sure that the blood vessels stay healthy. And then we've put something called betaine hydrochloride. Now what that does is improves absorption. Now betaine is also something you will find in your foods, quite a variety of different foods. But the hydrochloride is what I want to talk about, because you've probably heard of hydrochloric acid, and that's what we have in our stomachs. And it helps digestion, and of course it's meant to live just in the stomach. And many people have discomfort with reflux, or they have inflammation, and many people are taking antacids or things to reduce the acidity in the stomach, which of course might serve them in the short term. But we have to have acidity in our stomach as part of our digestive process. And one of the important things that, apart from keeping bacteria at bay and helping general digestion, in this particular context, what hydrochloric acid does is helps vitamin B12 to be better absorbed. Now, vitamin B12 is notoriously badly absorbed. And as we get older, we're less efficient at doing so. And so if we're taking antacids all the time, we don't often have enough acidity for us to be able to release the B12 from the protein that it's attached to enable it to go further down the system and be absorbed. So NeoLife said, well, that's a problem. Instead of just talking about it, let's do something about it. Let's put something in the product that enables that process. And so can you see how lipotropic adjunct has things for fats, it has things to keep them moving adequately in our bodies. We've got things in there, vitamin Bs, to make sure the homocysteine levels are just at the right levels. And then we've got things to help all that be absorbed better. All these little components just come together to make this an extremely powerful little product. And one that really people would take, they would really take benefit from using this on a regular basis. So this was just one of our Facebook posts, but basically just to remind you, it prevents cholesterol from oxidizing or changing, which when it's changed becomes destructive or potentially, so then it starts to affect our blood vessels. It lowers homocysteine levels, as I've talked about, something we all have but need to manage. It supports the health of our blood vessels by reducing inflammation and making them flexible. And also because it has this fat regulating component or ability, it also resists unwanted fat buildup in the liver, which is not specific to the heart, but is definitely specific to our health. And just to show you how effective it is. And also to mention that this is something that's quite on the increase now. It's called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, where it's not related to alcohol as such, but people are getting a lot of buildup of fat in the liver. And this is a useful product to be able to recommend as well, considering its value in terms of managing fats. So packs a real punch, this little product. Get used to the name, Lipotropic Adjunct. It's worth remembering, worth being able to pronounce, because we need to be able to add that to our core nutrition offering and benefit the heart in a big way. And if you want to know more about the products, for those of you who are not familiar with them, we've got a really good catalog that will actually show you other heart health products, which we'll talk about later in the month. But this will actually give you some sort of insight into the products that we've actually talked about now. So I hope that that's given you a little bit of insight into our cardiovascular system. Start with the core basic products, but I think we would all do well to actually supplement with lipotropic adjunct. You know, that's a decision that if we made it would be a prudent one and wise to maximize our heart health function in general. And just to help us then achieve our mission, which is quite a bold one, is to end the trend of chronic disease. We really are passionate about the fact that we want to have products out there that people are aware of because we know they work. And I think I've just shown you some of the detail that shows you that they work. And they will make sure that that pump that we have in our chest is going to keep beating for many more than 100,000 times and for many, many more days for all of us to make the world a healthier and a happier place. So go out there and talk to people and make them aware of this Heart Health Month in September. Thank you.